Good morning, Highland. On this day, it's easy to stay in a state of shock over the events of the last week or so. Easy to say, I don't know what to say, or I don't know what to do. But let's also confess that we are not absolved from speaking up, nor are we given a pass from doing justice. Obviously, I speak to you today as an old white guy who's safe at home in a white neighborhood with a sprinkle of people of color. But it's a white economy, white culture, and white privilege. And I have benefited from that privilege virtually all my life. And yet I say to all of us that to whom much is given, much is expected. I hope that no one hears this as some kind of scolding. It's more my own inner dialogue about living up to the duties of being a human being, a person of faith, and a follower of Jesus. I want to reclaim kneeling as a sacred posture. I want to reclaim it from that position of violence in Minneapolis. In one news item, officers in Ferguson, Missouri, the place where you would not expect it, in that place, officers took a knee with demonstrators for 9 minutes, acknowledging George Floyd's death. And I've seen now that officers in other places have done the same. Posture matters. Kneeling, that physical position from which defending oneself is extremely difficult. Kneeling places us beside George Floyd's brother, weeping at the sight of his brother's death. Kneeling places us in a posture of supplication and confession. It places others above us. It places us in a position where we can listen to the decades and decades of injustice and pain and suffering inflicted on people, if we truly listen. Kneeling acknowledges with my body that serving God involves humility, not certitude, confession, not self-defense of my privilege. And from this posture of kneeling, I feel a need for transcendence. Oh, not running away, not hiding in the basement, not bellicose statements. I need a bigger, wider view. It seems to me that historical struggles that are not justly resolved are historical struggles that are simply passed on to the next generation with one more layer of rage. From the first kidnapping of Africans for slavery, to civil war, to lynchings, to Jim Crow laws, to the drumbeat of murders that brings to this place today. We see that a part of our human family feels the police are not there to serve and protect, but to occupy. We who are not affected have not really raised effective voices. From this wider view, I want to know about the systems and the values that brought us to this place. I want knowledge, not stereotype. I want to know about the values that seem to undergird the indefensible. I understand the necessity of having each other's back. You go into dangerous situations, you want to know that your colleagues protect you. But can I really say that you have my back if you stand and watch me kill a person? If you stand there and are complicit in my own self-destruction? We cannot kill another human being without killing our own souls. 2 people died that day in Minneapolis. One is still breathing, but he's with the walking dead. I don't call that having someone's back, being complicit in their self-destruction. Do we have a police officer's back if we ignore the constant trauma and danger of the work that corrodes them into one cynical and angry and armed? For me, transcendence looks like a sheriff taking off his riot gear and marching with demonstrators, deliberately giving up the symbols and instruments of his power to walk with the hurting people of his own community and not brandishing his power over them. For me, transcendence looks like demonstrators quickly forming a protective circle around a fallen officer. For me, transcendence looks like a demonstrator handing a bottle of water to an officer on horseback. For me, transcendence looks like investigating the wrongs perpetrated on a beautiful part of our human family and demanding a change of systems, demanding accountability of personnel, acknowledging that harmful systems harm everyone. Clearly, I don't know all the answers. I don't even have all the questions. I think in pictures. I'm not that deep a thinker, but I think in pictures. And last week, I was in the waiting room for a visit at my doctor's office. And you know now that the waiting room is your car. You sit there until they call you. And sitting in my car waiting, a dove landed on my windshield right there at the hood and the windshield wiper trough. I was just 2 feet away. I could have reached out and touched the dove. Only the windshield separated us, and only one of us understood the concept of glass. The bird at one point started to step toward the dash and hit the glass, and the claw slid back down. And then the bird tried 2 feet, and both feet slid back down. Then they tried to scamper up, and they slid down faster. The dove paused for a moment, and then pecked at the windshield. Not hard, not trying to break it, but seeming to try to understand what was keeping her from going forward. I am no expert at bird body language, but she seemed perplexed, and then seemed to make a decision and flew off, only to return 15 seconds later with a twig in her mouth and place it in that windshield wiper trough. Flew off again and again returned within 10 or 15 seconds, this time with a green leafy twig also placed in the windshield wiper trough, and I realized she's building a nest on my car. She's building a nest in a place that's not sustainable. And I said out loud, why don't you use your wings and fly? Find a better place. Go higher. I've lived through a lot of this struggle for decency and safety and rights. I think it's way too easy to be satisfied with a few reforms and the false peace that comes when the streets are quiet again and when my white privilege is not shaken. But shouldn't we mount up with wings like an eagle and find better places of justice and equality that offers a true home for the whole human family? A friend gave me a book called The Book of Joy. It's a dialogue between the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And I will say to you that when I reference a book, it's one I've read. Both leaders, both Tutu and the Dalai Lama, have suffered greatly for protecting their people and opposing racism. And they discuss a deep joy that is theirs in the midst of all the suffering that they have experienced and that they have witnessed. They're great friends. They even tease each other. And Desmond Tutu said to the Dalai Lama that when you have that quizzical look, you look like a real sourpuss. And then you smile and your face lights up. Basically changing sourpuss into goodness. And he goes on to say, it's because you have not said, how can I be happy? You have said, how can I spread compassion and love? A bit later in their conversation, he speaks of his hope that we can convey to all of God's children how deeply they are loved. He mentions different kinds of human suffering and says, look at the children. I say that God is crying because that is not how God wanted us to live. And he said that when people try to help make things better, then through the tears, God begins to smile. Racism in America makes God weep. Racism in Louisville makes God weep. Racism in me makes God weep. Our sacred duty is to cause God to smile. Amen.